Well, greetings everybody, and welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast. My name is Steve Fredland, and I am your host for this podcast. We operate out of the Twin Cities metro area of Minneapolis and St. Paul in Minnesota, but I know we got listeners all over the place, so it's great to hear from you, and we'd love to continue the dialogue, and including if you have any ideas on where we should go with this. Today I'm excited because we're doing our first interview that we've actually published. This is with Joe Barnard, who is a local Twin Cities player who's got some great insights. And I've gotten to know Joe a little bit over the years. We don't really play the same tournaments, but I've still had the honor of getting to know him a little bit, so I'm excited to share that conversation with you. A couple of housekeeping items. First of all, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, the Free Poker Network. And I want to recommend for those of you who are out there or looking for a free game or just a chance to work on your game without a big financial investment. There's a lot of great bars in the area. Actually, they're nationwide. The Free Poker Network. Check them out. They got games going all over the place all the time. It's a great way to work on your game, meet some great people, and you actually have a chance to play for free and ultimately get through the bar, get through the region, get through the state, and play at nationals for even a shot at a World Series of Poker main event seat. So check them out. Great crew there. Brooke Leiter, Pete Bushy, the whole crew. Been fantastic to work with them and very supportive of what we're doing here with Rec Poker. So check them out. Also, I want to give you a heads up that we are starting a virtual book club. So this is with Jonathan Little's book on tournament poker. And what we're going to be doing is we're inviting all of you to read along with that and then submit audio clips. If you want more details on how that's going to work, get a hold of me, stevefredland@gmail.com, or you can get a hold of me through the Rec Poker Twitter feed or the Rec Poker group on Facebook, and I can give you all the details. We got deadlines and that sort of thing. But read along, submit it, and then I will compile all of those pieces along with audio that we've received from Jonathan Little, who's super excited about Rec Poker doing this. We're going to consolidate all of those, and we'll release them as a series of podcasts once that's all done. I would guess sometime in the summer of 2017. So check that out. If that's something you want to be a part of, please let me know. So a lot of cool stuff going on, but without further ado, I want to invite you to sit back and listen and enjoy the conversation that I recently had with Joe Barnard. All right, everybody. Well, I am here with Joe Barnard, and that is how you pronounce it, Barnard, yeah. Right? Because I want to say Barnard, just because the A's are in there. But it's Joe Barnard.
Barnard.
Gangster Joseph 1 on Twitter. Is that okay if I put that out there?
Yeah.
All right, so follow him, man. He's interesting stuff. So, man, I have a ton of questions. And we've already been talking a little bit before we started recording because I'm interested in your world and kind of what you're doing outside of poker too. But I just want to get started. Like, give us an idea of like what are you currently doing? Like, how much poker do you play? What tournaments do you play? Is this a full-time gig, or are you doing something else? Kind of just set the stage before we get into some of the details.
Sure. So I play poker as a way to make a living. I predominantly play tournaments, but also a little bit of cash. Almost fully no limit hold'em. Tournaments generally range from like 500 to 2,000 is kind of my target, and I really don't play that much, but I've been fortunate enough to do well enough to support myself.
You've had a pretty good run lately, especially.
Yeah. It's a good start to the year. Yeah. But,
do you travel a bit for that, or you just play locally?
Yeah, I generally travel basically within a state. 5 or 6 hours driving is kind of my limit.
So what does that hit? Now, for those of you who are not here, we're in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, so you obviously have running aces in Canterbury Park here. So what is that 5-6 hour? What else do you hit there as part of that?
That'll get you to Milwaukee, Chicago, any stop in Iowa, and the Sioux Falls, I guess, is generally a lot of MSBT stops, a couple circuit stops, and HPT every once in a while.
Okay. So do you play all or almost all the MSBTs then? Or are you sort of on that tour when they're local, or?
Yeah. Generally play as much as I can. If I have a busy weekend, then I'll take it off. But yeah, I'll try to get it to everyone that I can.
Okay, and so you're playing tournaments that are, higher level buy-in than most of our recreational players, but not so much higher that it's a lot of this still isn't transferable knowledge.
No, absolutely. I mean, poker's poker. The buy-in doesn't change the strategy. It might change the structure of the tournament, but still the decisions are, decisions. So.
And that's kind of the tricky part about the structure. Like, I just love playing the big tournaments because, 40-minute levels and deep stack tournaments. But, when the bankroll doesn't allow it, you end up playing the lower level tournaments, which are, maybe the competition's a little bit easier or whatever. Poker's poker, but you end up, playing 15-minute blinds and that sort of stuff. And it becomes such a different sort of tournament because you just have to make things happen so much quicker. Is that how you would sort of articulate? Is it more of a patience thing that you get by playing the deeper stuff, or
you just get more decisions? I think in a given tournament, which is what I like about the higher buy-in and better structured tournaments.
Do you characterize yourself as more of a patient player? You wouldn't get into some of the levels of aggression and stuff. Sure. Are you more of a patient player, or you're more of a let's make things happen, let's go, let's mix it up?
I think I'm patient in the fact that, like, no matter what my stack is, I'm just trying to make the best decisions. So I'm not like working to build my chips up at a certain rate. I'm just trying to make the best decision given my stack, and so I guess that can be considered patient.
And I want to get into that more when we get into this whole idea of I want to make the right decision all the time given my stack. That's always the sort of that piece where how much does that influence your decision? Like, you're in a spot and, it seems like the right decision is, whether it's to raise or to fold or whatever it is, but it feels like it should be a different decision depending on your stack size. And I think that's something new for some players, for newer players. I think that's something hard to grasp. How do you keep your eye on sort of the big picture of where are we in the tournament? Where's my stack size? I think you tend to, as you're just learning the game, and for me it was just 5 years ago or so, learning the game. What pocket queens is just pocket queens is just pocket queens, and I should just go. And how do you keep your eye on sort of the bigger piece of that? Well,
I mean, as far as live poker goes, you have a lot of time in between hands, so you can be thinking about those dynamics constantly. And I mean, there's a lot of dead time in poker. So instead of getting impatient that you're not growing your stack, there's a lot to think about. Like you mentioned, like what sort of stage in the tournament am I? What sort of stacks are my opponents playing? What am I playing? And
is that sort of how you spend your time in between?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hands.
Yeah.
So part of that is sort of reading your opponents, looking for patterns.
Yeah.
That kind of thing too.
I play almost fully live poker, and the reason why I like it a lot more is that you can kind of just focus in on players and try each hand, even if you're not playing, you can try to learn better what their strategy is and how they're approaching the game. I think I process things slowly, so 10 tables at once is tough for me. But,
right. Yeah.
But
so when you're thinking about that, sorry, this interview is going to be across the board because I have questions, but I can't stay linear. Sure. I just one question leads to the next. Yeah. It's one thing that we talked about recently on a recent version of or edition of the Rec Poker podcast. It's something I struggle with is between hands, before a hand, I can think, okay, here's the stage of the tournament. Yeah. I'm, we're close to the bubble. I have a decent sized stack. I don't need to get too crazy. Obviously, you're still always looking to chip up. You're still always making looking to make the best decision. But the overall scheme of the structure is I don't need to make things happen. I can kind of let things emerge. So that's the big picture of the hand. Mm-hmm. And the example I use in that is, let's say I have pocket threes on the button. All right, somebody raises, and we're deep stacking up. We're I'm just going to call here. I know you could re-raise, you could do a bunch of things. I decide I'm just going to call, and if I don't hit a three, I'm just done with the hand. Or hit open-ended or something like that. Mm-hmm. I know that you're probably going, this is bad thinking, but it's where my thinking is. And then we get into the hand, and it's heads up, and the flop is whatever, just some random 10, 8, 4 rainbow sort of flop. And the pre-flop raiser checks.
Sure.
And it comes to me. And now, even though I had this overarching paradigm that I was going to remember, just don't play a big pot unless you have a big hand.
Sure.
Then it checks to me, and I say, okay, I'm going to take a shot at this. So I bet, and then he calls.
Okay.
All right. Then he checks again. I think, okay, he's probably on a draw. I'm going to fire again.
What's the turn? That's important.
Well, I know. Okay, fair enough. I mean, but let's just say it's a queen or something like that. I mean, clearly it could be something in his range. He could have a 10. He could have an overpair. He could have a queen. He could have a draw. Not a lot of different things. And I know it matters. And I didn't think through the specific example. But I find myself in those spots, like, firing 2 or 3 bullets at it and then losing.
Okay.
And the question isn't about that hand. I mean, that hand, maybe I played it correctly, maybe I didn't. But it's this idea that I have this overall mindset. I spent this mental energy deciding that I'm going to play a small pot unless I have a big hand in this spot of the tournament.
Sure.
But then I get into the hand and I just forget all of that. Okay. I mean, are there tricks? Is that just discipline? And I know, regardless of whether I played that specific hand right or wrong, I lose sight of the bigger picture.
What your original plan was.
And all of a sudden I'm down in there, I'm going, man, losing half my stack was way more important than gaining another half a stack at this stage.
Sure.
And, is it just experience that you just sort of keep that big picture in mind as you're playing the hand? Or is it right to say, once I decided to play the hand, I should just play it and play it hard if I need to?
Well...
I know you're poker players, you'll say, well, it depends. I know that's always the start of the answer.
So in this specific situation that you gave me, you said you were close to the bubble, but you didn't tell me whether your opponent had more chips than you, or
they had more chips than me.
Okay,
let's say that.
So
or at least they could do a lot of damage. Let's say, but
but that's a big deal. A lot of damage means they could chop you down to 10 bigs. 10 bigs you can still squeak into the money.
Survival mode. Okay.
Whereas if they have you covered, or if they can chop you down to 1 or 2 bigs, then
it's probably my tournament.
That's a much different dynamic. So, and if you had them covered by quite a bit, then that's another dynamic entirely too. Yeah.
But let's say they had me covered.
Sure.
Because I'm thinking, okay, I don't want to play a big pot with this person, but that's part of why I called him pre-flop was.
But you want to hit your set. Then
yeah, because he's got enough chips where it's actually worth making that call. But it's just sort of that bigger. I have these bigger things in mind, and then I come into that moment, and it could even be just that, it could even be something specific around somebody faces a big bet and I love to hero call and all this, and I can lose sight of, okay, I think he's bluffing, I've got ace high, I think I'm good here, and that might be the right decision, but kind of everything else bigger than that decision fades away from me, such as, what if I make this call and I'm wrong? What does that mean for my tournament? What does that mean for the pay jumps? All of that stuff. And so I don't know if there's something, if it's just experience, if there's some sort of a mental game, or how do you keep the big picture in mind when you're making those micro decisions?
Well, I think the big picture should always just be your guide for the hand. You need to start with the very first thing. The guy opened. And apparently he has a lot of chips. He has you covered. So, and you're approaching the bubble. The first question I would ask is, what do you make of its range, regardless of your hand? Is it different than his normal opening range? Is his sizing different? There's a lot of factors.
Right.
Your plan was to, try to hit your 3 and win the pot. You get to the flop. He starts with a check, and now all of a sudden your plan's kind of changing, and you're wanting to take this pot down. You still have to think about, all right, what is his checking range?
Right. Why did he not continue?
Right. Is he trapping a lot? Is he check folding a lot? Is he more? You think he has a lot of check folds and also a lot of check calls? Is he kind of balanced? So you decide that maybe that you can make a profit by beating his check folds. So you go ahead and bet. Then he check calls. Now his range is morphing. Still, is he calling with his strong ace highs, or is he calling with? Is he always paired, or does he have a lot of draws in the spot? Is he calling with just random overs? It depends player to player. So
are you actually? this is the part we just talk about this a lot on the podcast.
Yeah.
When we sit there and break down a hand, we go through all that. Like, oh, okay, yeah, well, clearly, he's been playing pretty aggressive, been opening a lot of pots. He's showing down a lot of this.
Sure.
I know this. He's got this many chips. I get this many chips. I mean, we kind of break all of that down.
Yeah.
And then at the end, we kind of look at each other and say, yeah, but when it's in the middle of a hand, in a $75 tournament,
yeah,
how much of that are we actually processing? Are you, in something like that, are you able to are you consciously thinking about those things? Is it just coming naturally?
Yeah, I would say I am for the most part, but there's a lot of times where like I'll review the hand with a friend after, or just by myself, and I'll think, oh, this is something that I picked up on like in the review that totally missed it. Right, missed it, and so that kind of thing still happens. So I can see how that would.
But do you have any sort of a logical sequence that you follow? Like, okay, what's the tournament structure? What's this? How much is he opening? What's his range? What's my range? Is there any sort of a standard sort of mental checklist that you go through in those spots? Or what, I guess another way of saying that, or what are those things that you actually have to think about that aren't currently second nature? Or are you literally able to process what's his range, what's my range, how does my range work against his range? Is he going to fold to a 3-bet? Is he going to, I mean, that's a lot, for us Rex to go through. And so part of this is, we wonder, is it just experience, or are there certain things that, a checklist of things that we should go through in general, or are there, certain things that should carry more weight than others? Because I look at this and I say, okay, there's 100 different things I should be considering, and they're going to be offsetting. Some are going to say you should fold, some are going to say to call, some should say you should, raise. Which ones should we give the most weight to, and what are the most important things to actually be thinking about? Because part of the thing I worry about is that I'm wasting all this mental energy thinking about things that really don't matter, and I'm not thinking about the right things.
Okay.
So fix my problem.
Well, I think that each player kind of has to discover for themselves what the process is. Like, I wouldn't be very good at describing my own process, and I also don't think it would be very helpful to a lot of other people, because poker's like a game that each player interprets in a very different way. So I think that what I would say to help that process is just you need to work on refining your own process and figure out, okay, it was helpful to think about this. And if that's how you think, like, these are the 3 things, or these are the steps I need to take, then do that. But in addition to that, it's also very helpful to listen to other people and kind of, whether that's like training videos or friends, and hear like what their process is, and think how you can adjust, how you can put some of like what they do well into your own thinking process.
Yeah. Can you give me an insight, like what are there some things that you feel like that's something that you're like intentionally thinking about during a hand, like, because it sounds like a lot of you're just kind of naturally flowing. Are there certain things, like is it range or is it player type that you're intentionally reminding yourself to think about? Well,
I think just the basic details of the hand are really important. So, I mean, each pot, I think about, all right, what's in the middle? Like, blinds are 12,000, 24,000 with the 4,000 ante. Calculate the pot size right from the get-go.
Which helps that you're a math guy.
Yeah. Yep. And then the action starts. Maybe the under the gun player opens to 2x or something like that. Then immediately, start thinking about.
You have a running total of the pot size.
Right, yeah. Running total, that's important. And also, like what their range could be like in that spot. So just every decision. That's why I like a lot of this, because you can see every decision as it happens. And
so when the guy opens to 2x or whatever it is, when you say, okay, I'm wondering what his range is, I'm thinking about what his range is, are you actually thinking, see, these are the questions that most of us that we have, like, are you actually thinking, okay, I think this is ace nine or better, probably any pair. Are you going through that sort of thing, or are you generally saying, I think he's opening the top 15% of hands, or are you generally thinking, okay, I just know he's this type of a player, and I will consider that later. I just know against that type of a player, I'm more prone to be able to 3-bet or less prone to be able to 3-bet. Are you actually thinking about a hand range at that point?
Well, I kind of think in generalities, like when you're on the table, it's hard to think specific.
Sure.
I think about specific hands, but I'll think, all right, this is the general range that a player would use. Is this player leaning tighter or is he leaning looser?
Okay. But when you say general range, are you thinking actual like hand combinations? Or are you thinking like top 15? Or are you thinking about just sort of like a player type? This guy generally loose, I think he's a little bit tighter.
Well, I think about like, I guess the GTO range or the game theory optimal range to use in that spot. I just think like, how is this player adjusting to that? Are they opening GTO? Are they opening tighter or looser? Okay. Or kind of a warped range, I guess. So
you do a lot of GTO. Is that sort of how you classify yourself as a player?
I'd say I have a good general grasp of GTO, but I wouldn't say that I'm like super studious when it comes to it.
Okay, but so what I'm hearing though is you're thinking of a player in this position, in this stage of the tournament or whatever,
sure.
The GTO range or whatever range you want to define. There's some sort of a benchmark range
sure.
for opening in that spot.
Yeah.
Whether you think about that in terms of specific hands or top 15% or however you think about that, there's some benchmark range. And then I think this player is tending to be tighter or looser than that. And that's sort of good enough to start.
Yeah.
Because then you might have callers and re-raises and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's sort of generally that's how it starts. Okay.
Yeah.
Then it gets around to you. And now you're thinking, what? Are you processing almost like what your play would be before you look at your hand? Or do you look at your hand and then say, okay, how does that compare? The reason I ask is because I used to process much more before I looked at my hand, like, is this a good opportunity to raise or not?
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at my hand and it may not even matter. I might, whatever. And now I'm more of look at my hand and try to compare that range to that range. Mm-hmm. How much are you actually thinking about before you look at your hand?
I'm thinking about like what general range I'd want to continue with and what I'm thinking about, all right, what hands might I want to put into a 3-bet range, or what hands might I want to put into a call range, and what hands am I tossing?
So every hand, you're really thinking about that before you looked at your hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And I guess one trick that I use is I just look at one card instead of to kind of like give me a general sense of what I like kind of prime.
Okay.
It primes me because it's hard to think of all the possibilities.
Right. That's why I started looking at my hand earlier now, because it's like, I don't know, it seems like a lot of energy to spend.
It's hard to just, when it gets to you, look at your hand and then boom, process.
So you pick up, maybe you look at a 7.
Sure.
And you automatically know, okay, if the other one's a 7, I'm going to continue. If it's 8 or 6, I might, whatever that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah. And how I might be planning to continue too.
Okay. Interesting.
So yeah, I do see the argument in that it is a lot to process, like when it gets to you, and to look at your cards and make the best decision.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of doing that within the flow of the game is important.
Okay. Yeah, especially if you're playing, I think, these $30 tournaments with 12-minute levels.
Yeah.
It's hard to sit there and look at, I'm not going to look at my cards.
Right.
And then, as soon as I'm going to process all this, then I'm going to spend a minute, thinking through it. Just feels, almost, lack of etiquette there. When you're,
absolutely.
People are like, dude, let's go. You've just spent 10% of the level on your just one decision with your 9-7 or whatever. Okay. Well, that's super helpful. I mean, just that kind of tangible stuff, because I think what I've encountered when I talk to poker players that are super experienced, and you're too young to be super experienced, but for your age, you're super experienced.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that you take it for granted. And I even realize that now that I've been playing 5 years and I talk to a new person about it, I realize, man, they really don't know anything, just because you take for granted how much you're actually processing. Mm-hmm. But then there's those of us that are still feel like we're learning the game, like, okay, well, slow down, time out. There's a lot of things that go into that you're just kind of taking for granted probably now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would say so. It's easy to get frustrated when somebody takes, more than 5 seconds in a pre-flop decision.
Right.
But I mean, maybe this is one of their first live tournaments, or
Right.
it is a jump and buy-in or something, and so yeah. I mean, everybody's processing at a different level.
So you're a big fan of William Kassouf then?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. How great was that hand where he lost aces against kings? Were you a Kassouf fan, or were you?
I don't know.
For those of you who don't know, we're talking about the World Series of Poker main event. William Kassouf was, a high energy, high whatever personality. Where it seems like he would take forever to make decisions and kind of berate people when they were trying to make a decision. And
yeah, I like the table talk element that he brought to the game.
Do you think he was actually getting good information out of that?
I mean, that was just William Kassouf's process that we witnessed. I mean, maybe it's what he does to make himself comfortable and making decisions. Fair enough. So I think that's fine. The tanking does seem like a bit of a lack of etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah, that's the part I'm referring. Like the table talk, it seemed like even like if people would just say, "I don't want you to talk," I think he would have stopped talking. Yeah. I don't, but the tanking where it seemed like everybody was getting really agitated.
Right. Yeah.
Or do you feel like that's part of the mental game, is to get inside people's heads and?
It might be. It's not really something that
I just feels like it crossed the line a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, I generally want people around me to be having fun,
right.
And so I like it to be a good atmosphere. So
yeah. Well, and kind of along that lines too. Again, which all over the place. Yeah. One of my pet peeves, and maybe you can address this or at least get your thoughts on this, is there's players like myself that play, up to the $100 tournaments pretty comfortably. Like I like playing those, and then once in a while we'll play the 280s, that kind of thing. And then rarely, you play the $500 or $1,000,
sure.
Buy-in. And I bet it's probably 60 to 70% of the time that I played the 500s and up, and maybe even the 280s. There's some stage in the tournament, or a couple stages in the tournament, where I am berated. Where I am berated for my play.
Sure. Just totally against.
Yeah, like either.
Overline.
Yeah, like either I'll play king queen or something when maybe I should have folded to a 3-better. I mean, maybe I should have folded.
Sure.
I'm not and then I win a pot, and how can you play that? It's so stupid. I hate when these dumb players are playing these big tournaments and that kind of thing. Or I'll ask somebody for a chip count because they're sort of hiding their chips, and I don't have the emotional energy to remember everybody's chip count all the time.
Yeah.
So I tend to wait until I have a general idea. But when I'm in a hand that seems like that's a factor,
absolutely,
and it might be a tell because I'm asking the chip count. But either way, like I just ask and I get berated. Oh, what does it matter? Just play your hand. And I don't notice that in the weekday, the $75 tournaments. Yeah. But I play these bigger tournaments, and it's a long way of saying what I keep hearing from the poker community at large is we want to build these games. We want to get more people playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've had so many people in my spot where you play these bigger tournaments and you're berated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, well, I'm not going to play that again. I'm doing this for fun. I want to win money, but I don't expect to win $100,000. I'm playing this because it's sort of the ultimate for me. This is my World Series of Poker main event. That's $1,100 buy-in.
Right.
And I go there and be berated, and or at minimum, nobody's friendly at all. And I don't expect people to be super chatty, but like even grumpy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's so bad for the game. And but I don't know. Should I be? How do I view that, or what's the message to the poker community in that? I mean, do you see that? Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's really unfortunate when people are berated for any sort of play, because I mean that's the great part of poker is that you can make your decisions how you want to,
right.
And you can play your hand how you want to, and nobody should
mm-hmm.
Feel bad about however they choose to play.
Right. And if I made a mistake, isn't that a good thing? Don't you want me to keep playing?
Yes.
Right.
So I think when people berate others for that kind of thing, it's more like their frustration
mm-hmm.
with how things are going, or with I guess that's the biggest thing is maybe they're a little bit tilted, and a small thing can make them
mm-hmm.
voice that in a negative way. So
yeah, and I know that's the motivation. I don't think it honestly is personally directed at me because I don't think I'm that kind of a person where people see me and hate me or something. But it is sort of it's something to keep in mind. I think for players that it's not, you're not helping anybody. You're not growing the game. When most of us are doing this as our hobby.
Yeah.
I used to fish. Now I play poker.
Yeah.
And it actually kind of pays for itself. But I'm doing it as a hobby, and you want me to play those tournaments where I'm all overmatched. Mm-hmm. I think people like you would say, "Man, yes, Steve, come play. You should play all of these tournaments." So I think it's just something to keep in mind, and I think maybe for the people that are like me that are out there, like what you said, that's good wisdom. Just remember, it's not personal. It's just people frustrated, like we all get frustrated when we lose a big hand and that kind of thing. But I don't think it's good for the game overall.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I guess you could speak out, or if you see it happening, but
yeah. I've said that at the table. I said I just I wait a little while. So I just want you to know. I mean, I maybe have made the biggest mistake that I could make and whatever, but just how you're treating me is not making me want to come back and play these. And frankly, I'm the kind of player that you should want to come back and play these.
Right, and it's hard to be that eloquent at the table.
Right, that's why I wait a little while and that sort of thing. But
I mean, even if you see it happening to somebody else, it's good to speak up.
Yeah,
I'm not the greatest at that either, but I mean, yeah, it is a good thing to do.
Yeah. Well, let me shift gears a little bit. So I just want to I was looking at the Hendon Mob.
Yeah.
So I'm like, holy cow! I know you're young and I know you've been accomplished, but you've had a pretty good run here. I was looking back a little bit back to like August of last year. I see, so you win event 32 of the Midwest Poker Classic.
Yes.
You probably don't remember this. Like, you win so many tournaments. I don't even know. But going back like last August, you win that thing for like $33,000. You take third in Sioux Falls. Mm-hmm. The HPT, you cashed there in 29th in January. Mm-hmm. I guess in February, the World Series of Poker circuit event in Milwaukee, you took 16th. And now just recently, fourth place in the MSPT here at Running Aces.
Yeah. For
$23K. So, or whatever, $23K and change or whatever that was. I mean, I'm looking at that. That's a pretty nice run.
Yeah, if you play long enough, you'll get runs like that.
Come on now. But no, I mean, you said you don't play a ton. Like, are you playing a tournament a week or a couple tournaments a week, or sort of how?
I play the weekends. Like, the weekends are generally when the bigger tournaments are. So, that's more when I'll play. But
you're playing pretty much every weekend. There's something somewhere that you go to.
Yeah. But like this last weekend, I didn't play.
So you won't play like just the local deep stacks if there's nothing else.
Usually not. Sometimes I will, but usually not.
So it seems like a pretty good run then for a guy that's playing weekends.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was looking so I know the Global Poker Index and how all that works. And I know you're not you're a humble guy. So I'm looking at this. It says Joe Barnard GPI rank 418.
Yeah,
that's pretty good, right?
That is pretty exciting. That is something that I strive to improve on, and it's a good carrot to chase.
So that means however they obviously they don't count everything or whatever. So some of your stuff isn't in here, and some other people's stuff isn't in here. But the way that I interpret that is the way the Global Poker Index, at this point in time, so that you're the 418th best player in the world right now.
I guess for live tournaments.
For live tournament poker,
yeah.
Right? That's pretty cool. Yeah. Right? How high have you gotten on that? I mean, you actually...
I think this is the top it's ever gotten.
Okay, right after the MSPT score.
The MSPT helps.
Anyway, so congratulations on
thank you.
The recent run, and you're 52nd in Minnesota all-time money. And how old are you?
26.
Jeez. Okay. So I've got some work to do to catch you. We'll see. But anyway, so just wanted to throw that out there. But as you look back, are there any of those moments, whether in the last year or two or beyond, or earlier, that are really like stand out as kind of your favorite poker moments, or that you're most proud of, or?
Well, I think winning the event at Aces was a moment I'm really happy to look back on. I mean, I haven't outright won a tournament, so I think that's the first time that I outright won a tournament on the Hendon Mob.
Cool.
I mean, coming up after a lot of second place finishes, and I have my progression as a poker player, and my poker career has gone through running aces a lot. Mm-hmm. when I first started playing live, I used to actually, I didn't have my driver's license. I was like 20 years old. I used to bike from St. Paul to running races
no
to play
way.
the dailies.
Like 15 miles or what?
It's
like
30 miles.
30 miles.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. That's such a good story.
So, I mean, I always like playing there. I see some of the faces, like same faces and same people.
Yeah.
And I used to like grind to 100 there. So it's very like comfortable and good place for me to play.
So if you're biking 30 miles, you have good incentive to play your A game.
Right.
If you're going to do that.
I'm not doing that anymore. But
you get halfway and you realize you forgot your Aces cards. You got to go back.
Yeah. I think other than that, the DraftKings 50-50, where I finished 10th, my roommate for this summer was Aaron Johnson, and he finished 12th. So that was a really fun experience to both go super deep.
No, that's a World Series of Poker bracelet event.
Yep.
And so what they did is they pay, so half the field cashes.
So I think it was a one-time thing that they did.
Yeah.
But
okay.
So that specific event was half. Okay, if you finish in the 50th percentile and up, you're guaranteed $1,000.
What was the buy-in?
$1,500.
Okay.
If you finish 25th to 10th percentile, you get $1,500.
Okay.
And if you 10th percentile to on up is like a normal tournament.
Okay.
Like escalating.
Okay, and you guys finished 10th and 12th?
Yep.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So what was the payday on that one?
Well, because of its payout structure, it was a little bit decided, but I think it was like 11 or 12K.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it was a fun ride.
You guys get a little last longer going then when you get down to like 2 or 3 tables?
Not on that one, but...
Aaron has this way, I've played with him enough to know that he has this way of just
lasting.
Yeah. And I'm amazed. I've learned a lot. He would never even know this, but I've learned so much by watching him play. And not just the way that I look at it. I don't know how he looks at it, but just looking at it like the equity that he still has in his stack.
Yeah.
And I'm still prone to doing this. Hopefully less than I used to, but just sort of all right, let's go. I got 15 bigs. We just gotta go. And instead of really waiting for a good spot and then being willing to put it in. So I've learned a lot from watching this game.
Yeah.
That way. Well, that's pretty. When was that? Was that a couple years ago?
I think that was June 2015.
Okay. So when you look at your game, what are those things that you would say you do really well compared to maybe other people that you see around you?
I think I just like seeing what other people do at the poker table. I just like kind of trying to piece together what other people's strategies are, I mean. At a poker table, you probably won't see me talking very much, but I think that's just my general nature is I like to listen more than I like to talk. So I just like to, kind of experience and learn what other people are doing and then, try to find out what I should be doing to combat that.
So can you give me an example of that? I don't want to give away your strategy.
Sure.
When you say I'm piecing together somebody's strategy, I think for some of us that are in this experience, we might just say, oh, okay, they're pretty loose, aggressive, whatever. I mean, what does that mean for you when you say I'm kind of putting together their strategy?
Well, like every decision that a person makes at a poker table, just the nuts and bolts decision, like opening, I'm also very obsessed with details, but like just their open sizing, maybe at a 2,000 big blind, they'll mostly open to 4,500. Or and sometimes they'll mix it up. Like, well, what does that change? What and I like just trying to. It keeps me engaged in the hand. It's trying to figure out what that is, and most of the time it's like little things like that I don't know what it means, but I like to try to at least make an effort to figure out what it is.
So you're able to kind of put that away and then bring that up later.
Yeah.
When you see it again.
Yeah. So
your memory must be really good.
Yeah, as far as poker, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
And that's one of the things that I've struggled with too, because I don't have that same memory. Like, I can maybe when I was 26, but I can notice people doing something like, okay, they've been raising to 2.5x, now they went to 4. Wow. Okay, and then it goes to showdown, and you see pocket 10s. Like, okay, I put that away. Then I forget it. And so, I mean, for some of that, I just can't overcome that. I don't think there's a miracle drug, and I don't think there's any sort of trick I can do. I just don't have that. But I think if you have that gift of memory, those are the kind of things that could be huge, right? So later in the tournament, you see the 4X.
Yeah.
You know, and an overcard comes, you at least gives you some insight, right?
Sure.
That's how you'd use it?
Yeah.
Later on?
I think so. And maybe if you see pocket tens that one time, I wouldn't
you can't say it's tens, but I mean, but you have some idea of, maybe a middle pair or something like that.
Yeah, and maybe you can piece together.
It must be tens.
Right, exactly. Every time you see the 4X, it's tens. But like maybe there'll be other context clues within the hand that will help you.
It just feels like so much, like as a beginner, it just feels like so much like, okay, they raised to 4X instead of 3X, but this time they were in middle position instead of early position, and there was a limper, and this time there wasn't a limper, and this time it was, an aggressive player open in front of them, and, it feels like so much.
Yeah.
And, and that's part of this question is like, are you guys really, as a top level player in Minnesota, are you guys actually processing all of that? Or the way I think about it is I, at my advanced age, only have so much emotional energy to put into the game and still have it be fun.
Right.
And knowing I can't even remember half the stuff, like, what are the things I should really pay attention to? Is it bet sizing? Is it hand ranges? Is it their style of play? And maybe you can't answer that, but just sort of that's what I just look at this when we break down a hand and say, okay, now we're talking about, okay, are they raising to 2.5X or 3X? And like, wow, it's amazing to me that you can process that.
Sure.
But if we don't have that capability or that much experience, is that something, what should we give the weight to, I guess?
I guess how I would answer that is I would say, I guess whatever makes sense to you to give the weight to.
Yeah.
I think it depends player to player. But
are you in politics?
No, I think okay. So I think all the details are important, but you won't catch like every single detail, and that's fine. But I think figuring out like what details like help you make the best decisions.
So something like
on those.
So something like that. Let's say I think it's important to pay attention to bet sizing, and frankly, in the tournaments I play, it might not be as important because I'm not sure people really know what they're doing. I mean, with bet sizing,
right?
Pre-flop maybe, because what I see is the extreme. The guys min raise when they have aces, or they go 6X when they have aces or have pocket aces. Yeah. So those are the obvious ones that you can call out there. But other than that, like I think, okay, well, he's been betting half pot, on the flop, and now he went a third pot. Well, if part of that decision is, are they even realizing that, or are they just putting in the numbers that they have because they didn't really have change, so they just put in what they had? I think in the higher dollar tournaments, that's more intentional.
Let's see. I would say, no matter what they do, even if it's seemingly random or they did it, so there was a thought process behind it, and I guess for me, you don't have to know exactly what it means, but you just observe it, and it's another little thing that can help you make decisions. And
just trust that it's somehow your brain is integrating that into a future decision, and you can call it up when so magically. Well, and there's people that are part of our rec poker thing, Taylor Moss, Rob Washam, those guys out there that have that, I think, ability to remember more. But no, that's good. I think that's a good tip, and I think that is something you see lacking from, especially the really low buy-in tournaments. People are just not paying attention at all.
Sure.
So that's where I think my edge largely comes in.
But they are making decisions.
They are making decisions, absolutely.
There's a thought process.
But they're not necessarily, I think the edge is that they're not necessarily watching other people's decisions.
Sure.
Or, they're not going, they're not paying attention to what I'm betting, which can be good or bad too, because I know I can't rely on that later when I want to do something different.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what you do well, sort of observing, paying attention to people, that sort of thing. Is there anything that you've been, without giving away all your secrets, but anything that lately you've really been trying to work on? Or is that even how these top level guys like you, is that how you even approach it? Like, sorry, I'm asking a question and answering it. But for some of us, we're saying, okay, I went through a stage where I just needed to start getting 3-betting into my toolbox.
Okay.
or that kind of thing. I just need to start working on hand ranging really. So I kind of am working on one thing at a time. Is that sort of you do the same sort of thing? Okay, so you find out where's either a leak or an area for improvement, and say, okay, I'm gonna play my regular game, but I'm also gonna work on this.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, can you give away? You don't have to say what you're working on now, but maybe in the past, some things that you've, some steps that you feel like you've taken of intentional improvement.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that you mentioned, working 3-betting into my game and working it, like figuring out what spots of the tournament and then like you can work on like very fundamental things like your opening ranges and your defending from the big blind ranges. So there's a lot of fundamental things, and then there's also like a lot of mental aspects of the game that you can work on. And but so I guess the base question was, what am I doing right now?
Yeah, I'd love to, if you're willing to share. Sure. I'd love to know. And let me take notes.
But let's see. So right now, well, I'm always like asking questions and kind of questioning like how I've like played a hand, no matter like when it happens. So so I basically review every single hand that like I participate in, whether just myself or like with the help of a friend or something. But that's like a continual thing. One thing I'm trying to get better at is traveling and playing well, and I think like walking into a new place, you don't like see the same. It's just a different experience. So mentally, and there's a lot of new players that you have to learn. So there's a lot of like mental energy that has to go into playing well. So I've been kind of trying to figure out like how can I work on that part of my game. Because
you're staying in a hotel.
Right.
So there's different dynamic. You're not sleeping in your own bed.
Yeah.
Okay. So can I ask like what does that look like? Is that
so for me, a couple of tricks is started meditation, and that helps a lot.
Is that something you only do when you're on the road, or that's something that's part of your regular life now?
I do it continuously, but it helps on the road, I think.
Why do you think it helps on the road? Is that more because it's bringing kind of similarity or consistency or something like that? Or is it just helps you avoid distractions? Or how do you think that helps? Maybe even in general terms. I hear a lot of poker players that have gone down the road of it, adding meditation to their daily life.
I think it comes down to like reducing like stress and anxiety, and I think that gets in the way of making like good decisions a lot. It's like especially in the poker, like when you're playing poker, you might get like that adrenaline rush, and then you're thinking, your logical brain shuts off, and you make a bad decision.
You're working on your amygdala all of a sudden, fight or flight, let's go. Which my amygdala gets hijacked all the time in poker.
Yeah, and I think that like when you travel, I think that can happen easier because it's like a new situation. You aren't comfortable like playing at Canterbury Park or whatever. So
can I surmise that you're sort of doing that while you're at the table as well at certain times, or no? I mean, is it if you sense yourself getting agitated, or do you have whether it's meditation or some things that you do to calm yourself down, or is it outside of the table?
It is outside the table, but also one trick that I tried at this last Milwaukee trip is I started wearing earplugs when I played.
Not earphones, earplugs?
Earplugs.
Okay.
I could still hear the action and hear everything, but I could also kind of hear myself breathe and hear my heartbeat, and just that like
the rhythmic. The rhythm of
just that like hearing output would calm me down in certain spots and kind of let me get back to things.
Interesting.
Clearly.
Plus, it gives a nice message to people that, hey, I don't really want to chat.
Well,
no, I mean, not to be rude, but there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, so it's not something that like I'll try to do much in Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm more of a. Well, I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm more of a chatter at the table if if people are willing to chat.
Yeah.
The low dollar tournaments, we all get to know each other, that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
But there are times where I'll have headphones just because I just want to send a message. I'm not trying to be rude. I don't want to chat now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. As long as you can kind of hear the dealer. It's the guys that have the headphones in that every time the dealer says something, what? You're like, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's good. Anything else as far as that you've been working on that you want to, as far as your game goes, or tell me exactly what you do in this.
Well, I mean, I guess just recently I reviewed the final table that I played for the MSBT. It was my first broadcast with a somebody talking.
So, even though they were pretty much talking about other stuff.
Well, they talked
about some of it.
Yeah.
I was watching that, because I have a vested interest in you.
Oh yeah.
The audience doesn't know that, so I sold you my.
That's right.
My seat. So I got through the qualifier, and I don't have enough confidence in my game right now to play the 1100. So I sold it to Joe, and I told you it was a lucky seat, and you did well with it.
Yep.
So, but no, I was watching the final table. It was super fun to hear that. So so that's the one thing you just kind of watch and see. Is it because? See, I'm narcissistic enough where I would watch myself just because I like to see myself.
Oh, I like that too.
Okay. Because, running aces used to always have the final tables on Twitch and they'd have YouTube, and they've stopped doing that. I'm like, I used to love doing that. But part of that is then you can see the other hands.
Yep,
but
absolutely.
But part of that is your development of learning maybe what other people's take would be on the situation. Or, okay.
Yep. And you also, it's a rare thing in poker to be able to see how you are reacting to certain situations. And am I giving off physical tells? Am I... how's my posture in certain situations? And
did you see anything for yourself? You don't have to say.
In certain, yeah, absolutely.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
I suppose that's true. I know I pretty much on the Rec Poker. I told you this off air that I pretty much just tell everybody how I play, so you can all play perfectly against me. I was in a hand with Alberto, and some of you guys know Alberto, and he made a big bet on the river against me, and I called him, and I would call him with ace high or bottom pair. He told me, he said, I just made that big bet because I know you like the hero call from the podcast. So one of my downfalls, I tell everybody, how I play on there. But the things that I've been working on is I do tend, and I know this is a bad thing, but I tend to give the little speech when I have the big hand.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, what is wrong with me? And the guy even told me one time I folded because he made the speech. I'm like, and I didn't tell him he was right, but it's he was right. Yeah. So it's funny. If you could see it live, then you could actually really pick up on that, I would think, and work on that sort of stuff too. So if you're thinking about, and we're getting close to time, I appreciate your time, Joe. Yeah. Seriously, this is
thanks for having me.
And people don't realize that we got a chance to talk beforehand too. So this is fantastic for me. One of the cool things, as an aside, as I've gotten more involved in the poker community through Rec Poker and All for Africa, and just playing more, man, you meet some good people at the poker table. So we talked a little bit about people being gruff and that sort of thing. With man, for the by and large, it's pretty cool community to be part of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but one of the things I wanted to ask you about is. And we haven't talked a lot of strategy here, and hopefully people are okay with that. But this is a good insight. Like newer players, as well, maybe there's a two-part question.
Sure.
Because you play bigger dollar buy-ins than most of us, you're not going to see this as much. But what are the most common mistakes you think you see people making when you see mistakes? And I guess related to that is, newer players or lower buy-in players. What are those things that you think you just pay most attention to this? If you can master this, and maybe those are two different questions, but I think they're somehow related. If you were to say, if you could just master this, these couple things, you're going to be, you're going to be at least an average player, because below average players make mistakes based on those things.
I would say, I guess just focus on your pre-flop decisions, and just focus on learning what to do and from different spots of the table, what your strategy is pre-flop, and that's just a small thing that if you can really nail that down, then that'll help a lot.
And by that, what are the key factors that are included in that? Obviously, your own hand range,
right.
Understanding the opponent's hand range, and then how those two intersect. Is that sort of it, or what?
Yep. And also a lot of, I guess, newer players do a lot of limping, and I don't think that's necessarily detrimental strategy, but just think about okay, why am I limping? What are the reasons behind it? I think some newer players might limp because they don't want to risk too much without having a made hand. So. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see that a lot in the low. I mean, that's the big difference between going from small to big is, you play the small dollar pipe. It's like, dealers announcing, okay, we got 7 players in this spot. It's all been limped, and because it just entices everybody else too. And I just played a tournament the other day where, limp, and I get, gets like to the cutoff, and like I don't know what I had, Jack 7 or something. I just make a big raise, whatever, and then somebody calls. Whatever. And they ended up having ace king. And they'd already had like 3 limpers in front of them. And I'm like, wow, you just never see that in a higher buy-in tournament where somebody wants to play ace king 7-handed. I mean, maybe it's a good move, I don't know, but it's like, okay, you're just like, okay, what are we playing here? Totally different game. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so players work on that, just really pre-flop strategy. What should you be playing? Why are you in the hand? I guess the way that I would think about that is, why are you putting money in?
Yeah.
What's the point? What are you actually trying to accomplish here by putting money voluntarily into the pot?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So as you look at your game, is there anything that you're saying, man, I just, here's the things that I really want to work on myself? Or do you have, sorry, I ask a question that I don't let you answer, but, or in terms of, are there like poker mentors that you have or people that you watch and you say, okay, they're doing something that an element of the game that I really want to add to my game, which is another way of asking, or how do you learn outside of, playing and, breaking down your own hands? Are there books or people that you sort of emulate without giving away too much?
Well, I try to learn as much as I can at the table, and if I see something I like that somebody else is doing, I try to, fit that into my game if I can. Playing at the World Series is like, I played the whole summer last year, and I remember playing with like Niall Farrell and Mustafa Khanid and a lot of like really like top-notch players, and just kind of seeing how they approach the game hand to hand, and like just what they're saying to other players, and like what I like doing that with everybody, but like also like looking at like good players. As far as poker mentors, you've already talked about him, but Aaron Johnson is my travel buddy, and I've learned a lot like talking with him, and he hears endless hand histories from me, and I think we benefit a lot from discussing those kind of things. So
okay,
yeah.
Cool. So if I were to, we'll end, or unless you have anything else that you want to add, but I could sit here all day, literally, honestly. But so we end. What I'm curious is how your brain works on something like this. I'm going to throw out a hand situation, and I'm going to give you very limited information.
Sure.
What I'd like to hear is what's the first thing that pops in your mind as far as the first question that should be asked.
Well, why are you giving me limited information?
Because I want to see like what's the number one thing that you think is missing.
Okay.
There's know what I mean? There's a ton of stuff missing, and this is part of like sort of waiting. Or give me like the top questions that you would have that you think, okay, I what's the main thing I absolutely can't answer this question without this information.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm just making this up on the fly, which is kind of what I do.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. You're in the small blind. And there's a open, there's a call, and there's a re-raise. And it comes to you and you have ace king. What's the I mean, obviously that's incredibly limited information. But what are the biggest things that you have to say, okay, I absolutely can't even think about this question without this information.
All right. What game are we playing?
Okay, fair enough. I only play Texas Hold'em tournaments,
sure.
So let's start there.
Okay.
Yeah.
But stack sizes.
Is that the biggest thing?
That's the first thing that kind of.
Really, that's so interesting.
Yeah. Like you said, like people don't like to cover their chips and they don't like to be bothered, but it's super important for making decisions.
Okay. Yep. Well, I know it's important. That's interesting. That would be the first. Okay.
Yeah.
What else? What was
the open size?
Well, let me ask you. Okay, so you said stack sizes. What difference does it make? I mean, people that I talk to, people that I play with, would say, "What difference? You have ace king. What difference does it make?" This is honestly.
Yeah.
What? Okay, so stack sizes.
So
break that down for me.
Well, I mean, it's a big difference if you're playing at the beginning of a tournament, 400 big blinds deep, you're not looking to get ace king in pre-flop, versus maybe playing 30 blinds deep and there's an aggressive dynamic where the guy might be squeezing a lot. It's a much different. Mm-hmm. And there's everything in between that too.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. But I think that's an important thing, especially for the new players out there. You can't just look at your hand.
Yeah.
Say, I got jacks. Of course I'm going to go. Well, there's a lot of different dynamics.
Yeah, there's a lot of information
that go into play there.
Yeah.
Okay. What else sort of stands out? I mean, how much do you think about? I guess the player type. You just mentioned that. Is this an aggressive dynamic? Is this somebody that's is this person opening a lot and this person is squeezing a lot? Mm-hmm. That's part of the consideration.
Yeah.
I assume. Now, is that when you would see that much action? Are you thinking about hand ranges at that point, or are you still?
Yeah.
So you're just you're processing it as you go on. Because I think from an emotional energy perspective or a mental energy perspective, sometimes it's like I'm not really paying attention until I look at my hand, and then it's like, okay, now I got to backtrack. Oh, geez, what did they have? Because I actually have a hand. Now I got to consider it. But you're saying you're sort of from the first card down. You're going, okay, this is how much is in the middle.
Yeah.
This person just opened, and they're opening some kind of range. This person called, they're probably on some sort of range. This person re-raised, they're in this sort of a range. You're doing all of that regardless of what you have. You maybe looked at your card and you saw the king.
Yeah.
So you're actually processing all of that, so you kind of know when you see ace king, you already know what you were planning on doing with ace king.
Yeah.
God, so good. You take this for granted.
I wouldn't say like I did it perfectly. I mean, I've definitely, I can remember one spot where I misplayed ace king pretty badly in a spot like similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, me too. So I know it depends, but just in that spot, even in general, like ace king, how do you view that? Like, I mean, and I know you have not nearly enough information, but just sort of in generalities, you've got a bet and a call and a re-raise in front of you, and you pick up ace king.
Sure.
I mean, how are you thinking about that? I mean, it seems like calling is kind of the wrong thing, maybe kind of, sort of. Mm-hmm. Raising seems like you get in a lot of trouble that way. Folding certainly seems like the wrong play. And I know it depends on a number of factors, but just what's just your gut on that sort of a situation?
What's my gut?
Does that make sense? Or is that a bad,
bad question? I guess I wouldn't know what my gut I know.
Once I was in the situation. In the hand, but yeah. I just think, it's ace high, but it's ace king, and...
Sure.
I set you up to answer a vague question.
I think I think ace king is a very powerful hand. It has a lot of equity against a lot of hands. Mm-hmm. It's not as strong as aces or kings, and it's,
racing against
ace king suited is maybe the third best hand, but queens and then ace king off, and so I mean it's just one of the strongest hands in poker.
Right.
It blocks aces and kings really well.
So do you generally, in those sorts of spots, want to take the initiative and put the pressure on other people and say, well, it's ace king, depends on the stack, let's go with it, or in that sort of spot with that much action in front of you, are you prone, or is there a tendency to call with it and sort of see what develops? Or are you looking to get chips in the middle with that hand? In general,
I'm usually at least looking to put in a raise, I guess.
Yeah. To put some pressure on the opponents and see. Yeah. Yeah, I am too. It's just so hard because then you get shoved on and...
Yeah, and if you're at a certain blind level, then it's fine.
Let's go.
It's fine having ace king as a bluff too, because maybe you're like 80 blinds deep, which is pretty deep, and you don't think that they're shoving with anything but aces and kings, and so ace king is a pretty flexible hand, even though it can be put into a lot of different ranges.
Okay.
There's like a 4-bet fold or a 4-bet call or a 4-bet jam. It could be a lot of different spots.
One last spot, because that was a bad scenario, but good answer to a bad question. Just in general, I've gone through this period of the first couple of years I played. Man, my cash percentage was really good. In the money percentage, super, but my ROI was negative or barely positive. Then I, realizing that I'm just playing the cash too much, And I started looking at my multiple of when I do cash, what's my multiple of return versus buy-in? Like, okay, that seems like 3 or 4. It's like, okay, that should be higher than that for an average. So I went through a period of now I'm going to play more to win, and so the in-the-moneyness goes down, but my ROI actually went up, and that sort of thing. And so I have this weird sort of, and everybody does too, but I think there must be this sort of sweet spot of what, how often should I try to, not that I'm trying to cash on 23.2%, but there's this sweet spot of playing to win versus surviving the cash.
Sure.
And is there a mentality with that? Because I feel like my pendulum shifted from it was the TJ Cloutier sort of super disciplined, cashing a ton to the super aggressive where like, man, I'm playing to win every tournament. And I just make these crazy plays sometimes. And then I'm trying to settle into where's that equilibrium, or is it an equilibrium in general, or should it be not should, but is the mentality more around I'm trying to survive, trying to get to the money, and then maybe when I'm in the money, I ratchet it up to play to win. Or is there, do you have any kind of an overarching paradigm, or again, is it just it's the best decision at the time?
Well, I think that dynamic that you're touching on is really important. But I would caution against saying like I want I'm trying to play to win versus I'm trying to like cash as much as possible, and saying like this is how that change in mentality changed my game, because it's really, really hard to draw conclusions from a live sample. So
just because it's not enough,
right?
Yeah,
right,
fair
right.
enough. Yeah.
But I think that mentality has to be very fluid. If you have 10 big blinds and you're on the stone bubble, it isn't smart to play for the win at that point.
Right.
Generally, I mean, there could be a lot of other. You could be the shortest stack, and you need to
make something happen.
Right. But yeah, there's a lot of dynamics that are kind of fluid. So you kind of have to go back and forth between am I trying to cash here, or is trying to cash the most profitable thing, or is trying to accumulate chips and put pressure on the most profitable thing.
But as you look at, obviously the structure of most tournaments is super, exponential as far as growth to the top. So in general, it seems like you want to be playing to win. You want to be playing more aggressive, I would think, to get to where that money is. Or maybe put it another way in terms of, if you're more expected value of every decision, it seems like there needs to be some kind of an overlay or or leaning toward the aggressiveness. Or would you disagree with that?
I would disagree, I guess, because yes, like this is like talking about the bubble again.
Yeah.
But your chips just won't be worth anything. Like if you stone bubble, so if you wait it out, like in those 280s, it's totally a different thing. But like if you bag, then they do have a strong event incentive to chip down to just a couple of chips.
It's the first bubble,
Right.
But in general, I see what you're saying. So like the payout is $1,000 if you make the cash, and it's $0 for not.
Right, that's $1,000 in your pocket.
Right, and then the payouts are $1,000 for the next 20 spots.
Yeah,
that's where you can play to win more once you're. You're so really, it's so good. This is good. It just feels like then because you really need to move up 20 spots to get there.
Well,
to increase.
If you're playing against an opponent who if you get all the chips in and you won't be either busted or you won't be like in very close danger to bust, then you can put a lot more pressure on because. And then you can look to be more aggressive because they have the incentive to try to squeak
to wait. Right. Okay. It seems like, sorry, I keep saying the last thing, but I will let you go here. But just, it feels like my gut on you is just, you're very disciplined in terms of you're able to look at each decision and say, okay, what is the right play in this? Yeah. Versus letting emotion sort of get a hold of you.
Yeah, I think that's
important. It's so good. As somebody who tends to be more emotional, I'm trying to learn from that. I'm a logical person. I'm an analytic, we talk about math stuff, but I still have this emotional side that I've got to figure out. Maybe that's meditation or that's some sort of a way to, how do I control my emotions and say, I'm going to take my emotions out of this. I've heard, meditation. I've heard some people say, I actually kind of try to, mentally remove myself from the table and look down at the table and say, what's the right decision? That I think for me, that's a piece of it I need to learn is how can I make the right decision and not let emotion determine my decision?
Mm-hmm. And I would say like I'm just as emotional as anybody else, but I think.
But at the table, you're able to.
Well, I think like just focusing on what are the good things that will help me make the best decision possible.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel emotional at the table while you're playing? Yeah. Okay. You're able to not, because you would say you're not. I mean, yeah, you're an emotional guy, but you wouldn't say you're an emotion. Your play isn't influenced by the emotion, or is it?
No, I don't think so.
Right. That's that. How do you bifurcate that? How do you stay as an emotional person and, bad beats suck and all this stuff still, but yet not let that actually influence your decisions and avoid any of that suboptimal tilt?
Yeah. I would guess that was just...
How do you do it?
Focus on making the best decision.
Just don't do it. Exactly. No, good stuff.
But, I mean, you can find little tricks, like for me, earplugs or...
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've mentioned on this podcast, too, is like I like to chat with people at the table, but I found that when I do chat, I do get pulled out of my game. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not as engaged. Even though I'm enjoying myself more, my return on enjoyment is higher, but my return on investment is lower. And so that's part of that too. It's just recognizing even those things. Yeah. All right, I have to cut this off or I'll keep asking you questions. Okay. Anything you want to add?
No, just thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's fun.
Thanks for being on.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Well, once again, a huge thanks to Joe Barnard for being our guest on the Rec Poker Podcast. I want to thank all of you for listening. I want to thank the Free Poker Network for being a sponsor. And I want to give you a heads up that All In for Africa, the 6th one, is coming up April 1st. Starts at 10:30 a.m. at Canterbury Park. And in addition to about 50% of the prize pool, because the other half is going to the Against Malaria Foundation, but in addition to the prize pool, there'll also be at least 40 people who are bounties. Some of them with cash prizes as much as $200 and maybe even more. So it's a great event, a great turnout all the time. Last time we had about 140 people and just had a blast raising money for a great cause and having a good time and some good poker as well. So hopefully you can consider joining us for that as well. Until next time, I'm your host, Steve Fredland. Thanks for joining us for the Rec Poker Podcast.